Hello. In this episode of the Gap Search channel, I'm going to talk a little bit about how to make your DIY speaker wire look good and look as professional as possible using very simple method and without investing a whole pile of money. I'm going to start talking about this speaker. I have made another video where I talk about a couple choices of speaker wire to use actually, and that I found really good value for your money, and so there's a link in the description below if you want to look at that. In this episode we're just going to talk about how to make things look more professional and more properly terminated. I will also brush on a couple ideas about how to terminate them and what I prefer to use. So I have one cable here that I have done one side already. So this is a 12TC OCC cable. So basically there's about 24 cores here, 24 little, well not very little actually, but 24 wires in here, all braided, and there was an inner air core inside, and we're gonna get the negative and positive and split them apart and then try to terminate them properly and use different ideas. So the first thing we're going to do is separate the wires. So the best way to do that is just pry it like this and keep prying it up, and as you go you have to kind of lead the white to one side and the copper to the other. Basically it's just a color, they're just they're both the same, exact same wires, that just color skin differently, and that's one way to identify basically the positive and negative. Obviously you would want to use the clear one that looked like copper as positive and the white ones as negative, and that would probably be the wisest idea. This takes a bit of time, so you gotta be a little bit of patience, but as you see I've already done quite a bit of headway, so I'm gonna keep working on that, and I'm not gonna bore you with the whole process, so I'm just gonna pause the video and then show you after it's done, which will be in probably a couple of minutes. So here it is. We have 12 clear ones and 12 white ones here. So you want to basically take those ones and just twist them a little bit, and these ones just a little bit at the beginning. Of course, we still have to strip them just to kind of identify them. So that's what you do, and then you get a wire stripper. They come in various shapes. I'm going to be using this one. There's some that looks like this. You can use as well. What you want to do, you want to expose a very generous amount. So I would say about a good 1.5 inches here. So like a good portion here, because some of them may not be exactly as long as the others, so you're going to lose some at the end. You also want to allow room so you can you only need to expose this much actually if you're going to be doing my method, which is a bare wire method with a bit of soldering at the end. If you are going to use let's say a banana plug, then you probably won't need to expose that much. Probably 1/2 inch would be plenty, and you gotta do this for all 24 of them. So again, I'm not gonna bore you and having you watch me strip 24 wires, so I'm just gonna pause the video and resume once they're all done. So here we are, we got the 24 cores all stripped basically. So now what we're going to do is use some shrink tubing. So shrink tubings come in either you can buy them in a box like this, a sorted one, or they come in individual tubes. Usually the assorted ones are good enough, but sometimes you might want to buy some that have a more thickness to them. When you buy them with individual tubes, you can actually get some that are a little bit more sturdy, and they come a little handier for some of the intricate parts, like where you want them to be as solid as possible. So you already pre-cut a small piece actually from this tube right here, and what you want to do is you gather them all together and you feed this tube through. So if you're doing this, I would put this at the beginning, but you can still do it now. It's not really the end of the deal. So it goes. You want to push it a little bit. At the beginning I would push it far away because you're still working on it and you don't want it while you're soldering or anything to heat up, or so put it basically away. So you want to twist these in a nice way together, like this. And I would keep going to even twist the actual wire as well. Some might be a little longer, that's not a big deal. We can, at the end, we'll cut the end. And that's kind of what you want it to look like. So nicely woven together. And now you can actually put the shrink tube on top. Now we're going to do this for this side. Same thing. Again, we're going to twist these nicely together. Keep twisting and twisting and twisting. And here we go again. And we're going to bring the black one, put that over here, and there we go. So it's starting to look good, right? So that's what we're going to do. Now the next step is we are going to solder just the very tip end. The reason we don't want to solder everything, which we could, and that will prevent the oxidization problem, but copper is your best conductor, and so you want to keep the exposed copper, so when you put your binding post on, you're actually linking to some good copper straight to the wire. And the reason we want to solder the tip, because if you don't, it'll start to frail and it becomes a big mess, and it's just not fun. So you want to actually solder the tips, and that's what we're going to do next. Okay, so here we go. We're going to solder the tips of these. Basically, this is a very thick wire, so you need quite a bit of solder. Remember, we're going to be cutting quite a bit of the tip away, so don't be shy, because that's why we expose such a long piece of wire. There we go, this is number one. You don't need a fancy soldering iron like this. If any cheapo soldering iron will do. And you don't, I mean, having those little arms to hold it definitely helps, but for many years I never had anything like that, and I did just fine. So you don't need to invest in too many things. Just a $20 soldering iron will do. Pinch it up a little bit, and that is good. And what you want to do then after that is you want to cut the tips right here, so it goes out, and there we go. Now you see this is what we have now. The next step is we want to remember those shrink tubes, so we're going to shrink those guys. I usually leave a little bit, don't have to go all the way till the end, so in the future if you want to expose a little bit more wire you can, and because the tips will eventually tarnish over the years, so every year or so you can expose a little bit of copper, fresh copper, and just we have a better connectivity. You could also sometimes just wipe them out with something that's vinegar or certain antioxidants that could remove the tarnish as well. That's if you don't want to strip them all over again. So I'm going to shrink these. If you don't have any hot air gun, you could just simply use a lighter and you just go quickly and that will start to shrink. In my case, I do have one, which will be a little easier. It will be less blackening of the areas. So I will use my little hot air gun contraption here. And we are going to, as you can see how it starts to shrink. There we go, we got the one side done. Put this away for a second, and then we're going to do the other one. Now we're going to shrink the second tube. So we got that. The next part is we are going to bring in the bottom part. Remember this one we have hiding here waiting. There we go. So you want to push it in. More, here we go. It's kind of, you want to be a little halfway between here and here, and that should give us a good end result here. So now we are going to shrink that. Same idea. Again, takes a little bit of time to warm up. Kind of don't want to hurry it too much because then you can burn it. So you don't want to over. If you're using a lighter, you gotta keep your lighter moving a lot, just so you don't burn it and cause burn marks. And here we go, pretty much done. As you can see, so we have a nicely terminated wire. So here we go. We got it basically terminate on both sides, and if you end up with a couple, sometime you might end up with a couple little loose strands that usually they're not long enough, they never made it to the top. You can always cut them off. This one right here, for example. Cut it off. And just that should be good. We should be good to there. So that's both ends there. And so this is one way. The advantage of this method is you don't need any fancy like banana plugs or spades, or pins. They cost a lot of money if you want to get good ones. And B, all you're doing is extending. You have another link. So you have a link from the copper to your connector, and then from the connector to the speaker. So you're losing every time you're connecting something. It's not as solid as connection. You got your straight bare copper wire here. You're going to put it in the binding post. You're going to tighten it, and you're good to go. There are drawbacks to this method. Number one is that you have to tighten them. You know, once you tighten them, come back a couple of weeks later, even a couple of days later, just make sure they're tight. Sometimes they kind of loosen up a little bit after a while, so you know, make sure you keep them tight. So from time to time, just check your binding posts that they are tight. You'll be amazed how many times you see loose wires not properly connected to the binding post. The second thing is bare exposed copper will tarnish finish after a certain time. So every from time to time you want to just clean them really well, and you can often connect them again. You can use some Brasso if you want, just to clean them, and some vinegar to wash it off, and just keep them, and then you can connect them. And this is something you only have to do like once a year sometimes. More extreme, you can expose a little bit more wire, and then you got fresh bare wire, and then you can connect them again. And so this method does require a little bit of maintenance over time. But I mean, even connectors, they do break down, they go bad, sometimes you have to replace them. So don't think every method is bulletproof. I'm going to go and talk about the next pair of wires. So this is for the 12TC. I think for this particular wire, this is the easiest method, because these are very thick wires. This is like about 7 gauge basically. I measured it before, it was 3.9 millimeter or 3.8 millimeter. So it's like a 7 gauge wire. This is very heavy duty thick wire, so it'll be hard to find great connectors. You can, but often you definitely have to also, you know, when you tighten those screws, you gotta make sure this fits into your connectors. Most connectors may not accommodate heavy wire like this. Some do, the high-end one, but then you're spending a fortune on some of them. So I find this method works really great. It's cheap, and it's straight contact, and it works great. But do solder the end, otherwise you're going to have a lot of hard time and you'll be hating it. Alright, so we're going to move on to the second part, where we're going to work with the other speaker wire. It's a little bit cheaper. But in that particular method, I'm going to show you how to use some of the sleeves as well, which makes things even look nicer. Now I'm going to show you how to use sleeves and make things even looking nice. In the other 12TC wire, it's such a beautiful wire, you really do not want to cover it. But let's say you're using something like this, you probably don't want it to look, I mean you could, it's not a big deal, but you probably want it to look nicer. So what you can use is you can buy those expandable sleeves, and they come in different color wherever you like. They're pretty cheap, and what they do is they expand. When you do cut it, I suggest you just quickly burn it a little bit. It just prevents it from going really frayly like this. It's probably not 100%, but it helps a little bit. Go in a little bit and make it. Now what you do is you feed your wire into it. If you try to push it, it's not going. It's pretty simple. Go before it, and when you push, it grows like this. And once it grows, you can push it further. So once you push your wires through, basically you just keep going like this, and you feed it like this, and you feed it, it just keeps going. And the other way around too. So now we're going to expose. Actually, before we do that, it's probably easier to put our shrink tubing, so you want also to put a shrink tube as well on top of all this. If you find at the end that you have too many frills, you just cut some over again. Bring your trusty lighter and just bring them up a little bit. There you go. And then what you want to do is you want to put your shrink tube on top of all that. You can choose any color you want. Try black. If you want to jazz it up a little bit, you can put white, red, wherever your heart desires that day. I'm going to slide this back for now, and we're just going to move this back a little bit so we can work on the wire. So now we're going to expand probably this much, and we're going to strip here a little bit. I'm using bananas this time, so I'm not going to take too much off, about this much. so many banana plugs on the market, connectors. My favorite and the cheapest are by Sewell, and I love them because they make easy connections, and they're very, they don't go as bad. Some of them is the elasticity of the springs here go really bad, and they become so loose so quickly. So this is one grade. One grade above that, you can buy the locking ones, the ones that you can basically turn. It actually tightly makes a nice lock. They're a little more expensive, but they're a little bit better than those. I like these because they're so easy to connect. You basically open it up, slide it in. Actually, this is the red one, so let's put it on the red one here. You slide it in, and you just expose a little bit of the wire, and then you bend them all around like this, and then this goes on top. And you basically, it's a brilliant method because now you have a very nice, good copper contact to the connector, and it's just perfect. And you do the same thing on the other one. I'll pick a black one this time. Same thing, you just open it up, just make them nice together like this, or around, and then same idea, just split them around like that, and tighten it, and off you go, and you get a nice connector. So that's for this part. Then what you want to do, just imagine this is very long, right? So I just cut a piece because it's just for demo purpose. I didn't want to throw away too much wire. So basically what you want to do is you want to push it just past the part that is of the expandable shrink tube, the expandable tube. So, and then I'm going to use this time a lighter just to demonstrate the cheaper method of doing things. And you just keep turning and turning. Because not everybody has a hot air gun around, and as you can see, it actually does work. It just takes a little bit of patience and moving. There you go. So it's nice, and so yeah, so you get a nice finished connection. I did one before. This one, what I did, I actually used two 10 gauge wires. You can see one here and one here, and each one of them has its own sleeve. So basically what we did is two of that. Okay, this one is done with black, and but I ended up putting them again together, so basically they're separated from each other with a little bit of sleeving, and then they come here, and the two red ones connect together and the two black ones connect together, and now we have banana plugs here. It's just basically you're doubling up. You have a double 10 gauge. It's kind of like what we used to call bi-wiring. It is actually bi-wiring. There's two wires, and bi-wiring to 10 gauge. That's a very heavy duty cable. On the other end, I did a what we call is just a bare wire termination with a bit of solder at the end, kind of the method I showed you before. And just to give you another example, and this is what you can expect it to look like. So you have a nice one nice sleeve covering both, and then they split into two here, and then they join again into ones, because 210 gauge would be impossible to get into those banana plugs. That's way too much wire. And that's your wire. This is another alternative to if you want to use something less elaborate than the 12 TC wire. So I hope this helps you a little bit, just in one example how to do it. I'm not perfect. I probably not showing the best example that could be. I'm still learning like everyone else. Got a bit of experience, and I'm just showing you what I know. The choice of cables is so many, there's way too much out there. Like I said, the video that I did before, I'll link to it, that shows a couple of those speaker wire that I chose and why I chose them. And but there's so many other options. If you have ideas, your favorite cables, put a comment below, share your information. I would love to hear from everybody what they like. I hope this helped someone that's probably starting out and trying to figure out how to make a decent looking cable without going to the store and seeing the fancy price tag of $100, $300–$500 for this cable and $3–4,000 for the other. And sometimes we get lured by those expensive price tags thinking, oh, it must be such an amazing cable. Often they're just cables like everybody else. They're taken from the same manufacturing company with labeled nicer. There are some really good cables out there and they cost a lot of money and they probably give you that 5–10% more, but is it really worth the price? That's up to you. I hope I helped someone. Please subscribe and hope to see you again.